So the Bank of England have just cut interest rates slightly. And for a while they weren't, right? For a while the headlines were rates held at 5.25%, inflation not fully under control, we're being cautious. And if you're a homeowner, a renter, small business owner, or just someone, who likes food and electricity and those luxury items, this is more than just a headline. It's your wallet, it's your future, it's your stress levels. Welcome back to the Misinformation Podcast, where I try to help you make sense of economics without the jargon and hopefully without putting you to sleep. My name is Z. I'm also known as the Reluctant Accountant, and today I'm looking at why interest rates in the UK still feel very high, why the Bank of England has held the line for so long, and how it's quietly costing you month after month after month. And we're going to ask a bigger question too. Are we fighting yesterday's inflation while still ignoring today's pain? Let's get into it. All right, quick scene center. Currently, at the time of recording, interest rates are 4.25%. They'd recently been cut from 4.5%. Not so long ago, the base rate sat at 5.25%, which was the highest since 2008, the year of the global financial crisis. So inflation, which has peaked at 11% in 2022. Remember those times? Fredo was out of reach. That's since fallen to around 2.8%, which is, on paper, really good news. But here's what's weird. Even though inflation is falling, rates haven't budged that much. And that was confusing a lot of people, because we were told over and over again that the high interest rates were needed to get inflation down. Now, the bank does have a point, sort of. They're worried that services inflation, so things like wages, hospitality, transport, are still running hot. I don't know about you, but if wages are running hot, my employer forgot that, but whatever, I digress. I'll pick that up with them in my next one-to-one. But for the rest of the economy, things are cooling fast. Growth is flat. Retail sales are sluggish, consumer confidence is down, and people are kind of treading water. I know I often say, living in London, it just costs you £10 a day to exist. Like, you leave your house and £10 is gone. I don't even know what it's going on. You just know that you will return to your house £10 poorer. And even if you stay in your house, don't try and hide, because the money will be taken from your bank account. I don't make the rules. That's just what it is. So what happens when interest rates are high while inflation is falling? Let's talk about that. So let's start with mortgages. If you're fortunate or maybe unfortunate, I don't know, enough to have one. There are about 8.5 million mortgaged households in the UK. Around 1.5 million are expected to remortgage in 2025. And for a lot of them, it's going to feel like being thrown off a financial cliff. Why? Because 2 years ago, people were locking in 5-year fixed rates at 1.5 or 2%. Now, deals are hovering around 5%, some are higher. So let's put that into numbers. If you had a mortgage of £200,000 and you were paying 2% interest, that's about £850 a month. Say the interest rate is like 5.5%, that jumps to over £1,200. That's £4,000 more a year for the exact same house. And if you're a renter, don't think that you're safe, because most buy-to-let landlords, they've got mortgages too, and they're passing those costs on. Rents in some part of the UK are rising at double-digit percentages, especially in cities like London, Manchester, Bristol. And there's no rent control. There's no reprieve. It's crazy, because I remember the first time I was having this conversation with my brother about renting, and he was telling me, which I didn't even know happened, that somebody he'd worked with, and this is a couple of years ago, this isn't even recently when things have gone really crazy. I would say this was about 5 years ago, 5 years ago, we'll say 5. I remember having this conversation with him, and he said to me his colleague, who at the time was on £68,000 a year, 68,000 Great British pounds a year, so considered one of the high earners in this country, we'll get into that another time, wasn't able to rent a property without paying I think it was like a year rent all at once in advance. I was like, the way that I'm speechless now was how I was speechless then. I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And apparently this has become a common thing. I've since seen stories in the newspaper, people writing in, talking about how they went and got interviewed to get a room in a house, not even a whole house, but they had interviews, and then there was a list given to them by the current occupants about the things that they couldn't do. The housing market is crazy. So when it comes to interest rates, I need you to remember that often this is a policy decision, right? So the Bank of England will deliberately and can deliberately make borrowing expensive. They do this because they want to cool spending, chill demand out, and squeeze inflation. So if we're not spending so much, brings demand down, prices then don't go up. That's the idea. But who's getting squeezed? You. Not the corporations, not the asset rich, you. High interest rates don't just hit households, they hit businesses too, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, so SMEs, the backbone of the UK economy. Let's say you run a small cafe, you want to refurbish it, add some seating or something, maybe launch an app for deliveries. That'll cost, I don't know, £30,000. 2 years ago, you could have taken out a business loan at, say, 2%, 3%. Now you're probably looking at 6% or 7%, maybe even more. That's hundreds of pounds a month in interest, money you could have spent hiring staff or expanding or building business resilience. So what do people do? They delay, they cancel, they shrink. So let's zoom out a little bit. And we can apply that logic, for example, to renewable energy products, construction firms, tech startups, green infrastructure. Do you see where I'm going with this? If borrowing is too expensive, investment dries up. And when investment dries up, so does growth. So this is the part where we ask, is the Bank of England fighting the right battle? Because inflation in 2022 and 2023 was driven by global supply shocks. So COVID supply chain messes, the Ukraine war and energy spikes, and commodity shortages. But those shocks are mostly resolved. So what are we doing now? It feels like we're keeping interest rates mostly high in case inflation comes back, like we're chasing this ghost. It's a bit like slamming the brakes on your car, even after you've just stopped, just in case the road gets slippery again. There's a growing argument among economists and even some bank insiders that we've overshot, that we're now causing more harm than good. And the worst part, the pain isn't evenly spread. Very rich people are not feeling these high interest rates like these 4.25 or even the 5% when it was. They're not taking out new mortgages. Their wealth sits in assets. But younger people, renters, new buyers, working families, they feel every single basis point. Let's take a global view. The US Federal Reserve has also kept rates high, but has clearly signaled it's ready to cut. So markets expect several cuts this year. The European Central Bank has hinted at a June 2025 cut because inflation is now under 2.5% and unemployment is creeping up. And Canada, Australia and others have already begun easing. So why is the UK still dragging its heels? One theory is credibility. The Bank of England was accused of being asleep at the wheel when inflation took off. So now they're overcompensating, trying to prove they're tough, they're responsible, they're serious. But the problem is the longer they wait, the more the real consequences hit home for people. So what can be done? This is where things can get tricky because the Bank of England is independent. That's a good thing. We don't want politicians fiddling with interest rates just to win elections. But independence doesn't mean infallibility. The bank has a dual job: keep inflation around 2% and support growth and stability. It's doing the first part, barely, kind of, if we're being generous. But the second, it feels like it's missing the mark. So what could help? A clear guidance, tell us when cuts are coming, maybe a nuanced inflation target, acknowledging that 2% isn't really a magic number, and some pressure from government to step up on the fiscal side so the bank isn't left doing all the work. Because right now, high interest rates are doing the heavy lifting of austerity, but with zero accountability. Look, I'm not saying that monetary policy is easy. The bank has a tough job. But right now, millions of people are quietly being drained, not necessarily by tax hikes, not just by government cuts, but by this invisible hand of interest rates that just seem to take ages to make any change or come down. And the worst part, most people don't even realize why they're struggling. They just know life is getting harder. So let's name it. Inflation is falling, but the cost of delay is rising. And it's time the banks stopped punishing households for a crisis they didn't cause. When I was thinking about recording this episode, I was aware that the Bank of England had recently cut interest rates by 0.25%. And there's a lot of chatter a lot of the time about interest rates. People talk about interest rates I think sometimes in the abstract, certainly in social conversations that I have. If people don't have mortgages, they don't really look at it. And even sometimes when you're in a mortgage, if you're in a fixed deal, you don't think about the impact of interest rates because it seems like something outside. I don't have a mortgage, so why do I care? And something really interesting happened to bring it home to me that we do need to reinforce the impact of these interest rates movements, whether up or down, and highlight to people the impact it has on their lives. With this most recent interest rate cut, all of my bank accounts, makes me sound kind of dodgy, all of my bank accounts, all of the hidden ones and the unhidden ones. No, but all the accounts I have or credit cards that I have, they all sent me a communication saying, oh, by the way, your interest rates have cut. And so this is what that means. So for your savings, we're going to give you less and we're going to do this and do that. And I thought that was really interesting. I deleted all of them because, I kind of know what they were going to say. But I thought it was an interesting step in this financial empowerment. I don't want to say literacy, but this financial empowerment in trying to offer people the information about how this impacts their everyday lives. I don't know if that does it. I don't know if you can bend a set rod, if that makes any sense. With the many people have lived their whole lives without having to really incorporate the impact of these things onto their everyday lives. And so it feels difficult as an adult to make that shift. And this is one of the reasons that I feel we need to ensure that there is some sort of proper life skill training. So that is second nature to people. So that when people are in schools, they are learning about interest rates, they're learning about the impact it has, they do some sort of home economics so that these things can be incorporated into it. Because so many times I come across adults in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, whatever, who think about interest rates in the abstract. And these are not necessarily economic, but policy decisions that are made to try and respond to the prevailing economic situation. And they have an impact on everybody's lives. And if you are empowered with the knowledge to know how it impacts you, you also, to a certain extent, are empowered to make more informed decisions to hopefully navigate your way out of situations that you don't want to be in. I'm going to leave it there because at certain times I feel like I'm rambling. And if I am, I apologize. But, you're here now. So well done and congratulations for making it to the end of today's episode. It's been a pleasure, a privilege as always to be here with you. I will be back next week. Please do join me again. If you want to connect with me in the meantime, in between time, I am available on social media, TikTok and Instagram at The Reluctant Accountant. If you are listening to this on audio, you can also watch the video of it on YouTube at the Reluctant Accountant channel. So just go to The Reluctant Accountant and look for the Misinformation Podcast. It's very easy to find. I believe in you. But in the meantime, until next week, have a great week. Don't miss me too much, and I'll see you then. Bye.